Welcome to the Smyrna First Youth Ministry podcast, where our entire goal is to send students on their journey in a manner worthy of God. This week, we talk with a board member of Chrysalis, Stephanie Malhotra. She's also a high school small group leader here at the church, and we discuss this amazing retreat and how God has used Chrysalis and Emmaus to transform lives and can transform your life too, should God be calling you into that. So please enjoy this conversation. Hey guys, welcome to the Smyrna First Youth Ministry podcast. This is episode 3, where we are talking to Stephanie Malhotra. She is on the board of Chrysalis. You guys heard a little bit about what that was if you watched worship last night. If not, go back and watch some of the testimonies. They were incredible about what God has done. And so, Stephanie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Yeah, of course. So tell us a little bit about who you are, how are you connected to Chrysalis, and we'll talk about what Chrysalis is as well.
Sure. So, some of y'all know me. I love being involved in the youth ministry. I sing in the praise team on Sundays, and we've been coming to the church for a good 7-8 years now, and we're part of the Reach Sunday School class. My husband and I. And we have a 9 and 6-year-old. And I grew up in the Atlanta area, over in Conyers First United Methodist. And when I was 16 years old, my mother went on Walk to Emmaus, which is the adult version of Chrysalis. And she came home and she wanted to sponsor me for this retreat thing. And I grew up in the church. I was involved in the children's choirs and, just all the things. I was involved in youth ministry, NYF, we called it back then. So I was involved in the youth ministry and then in youth choir, and we went on choir tour. I did all the things. So I said, why do I need one more retreat to go on? No, I don't want to go. So Jesus, trust me, it's going to be different this time. So I went on my 3-day weekend, and it just was life-changing for me. I thought that I had a relationship with Christ just because I went to church and because I was involved in all these things. How could I not have a personal relationship with Christ? But when I was there, I suddenly realized that I never actually given my life to Christ. And I did it in the chapel at the campground there. It's not really a campground, but we call it camp. So ever since then, I served on a few back when I was younger, and then I moved away and you didn't stay involved. But then when we came back, once I was married, I wanted Anil to go on Emmaus. So I sponsored him for that. And one of the great things about Chrysalis is, even if you've been to Chrysalis, you can still attend Emmaus when you're an adult, because life is very different at 16, 17, 18 than it is at 36 with 2 kids. So I was able to go back on Emmaus, and it was just tremendous. And it really got me back involved, and I started serving more, and I mostly serve Chrysalis. And I'm on the board now. I'm the music chair on the board, which has just been an amazing blessing. I get to serve with some of my really great friends and help form the future of Chrysalis. So that's how I'm involved in it.
I think that's really encouraging too for students to hear, because I think so often we have this assumption about people who have grown up in the church that, of course, I've already given my life to Jesus. I've always known this. But sometimes we don't think of it's an actual surrender. And sometimes we just kind of assume we've done it when maybe we have, maybe we haven't.
Absolutely.
So tell me, what is Chrysalis? I've never been on a Chrysalis weekend. I know that God's done incredible things through it, but what is it?
Sure. So it is, I'll give you kind of just some of the nuts and bolts of it. It's a 3-day experience. It is from a Thursday night until a Sunday afternoon. And you have to be sponsored by somebody who's already either been to Chrysalis or to Emmaus. It can be your parent, it can be a friend. I know Evan Phillipson has sponsored, people. So it can be either of those. It's anybody from the age of 15 to 24, but you have to have completed 9th grade. So this summer, rising 10th graders could go. Now, when I say around 16 to 24, that's a huge age range. We recognize that. So when you're there, you actually get placed into a small group, and you get placed into a small group that you spend most of your time with. And they're going to be people that are around the same age as you, because that's going to allow you to really bond with them. So There's usually 5 or 6 people in that small group. And I'm trying to think. So we have them twice a year. We have them in July, and then again we have a girl. So they're split into girls and boys flights. So you only have, they call them flights, weekends. You call them a weekend, but we have so we have all girls and then all boys. And so the girls and the boys both have one coming up in July, and then the girls will have another one right after Christmas, and the boys will have one on MLK weekend in January of next year. So that's kind of the nuts and bolts of what Chrysalis is. I know there's a lot of concern sometimes that there's all this mystery about, oh, why won't anybody tell me anything about what Chrysalis is? I think part of that is it's very hard to explain from people who've been, because it's a very personal experience. Mm-hmm. Chrysalis is different for every single person who goes, because you have people who go in who are really searching for God, don't really have a great relationship with God. You have people who go in who are super on fire for God and have committed themselves, and are studying every day. So people go in from all different perspectives into Chrysalis. And I think the mystery around it is that we have things that we don't tell people before they get there. But it's not that I can't tell you. I wouldn't get fired from the board for telling you. It's more that my husband has a great way of explaining it. So he said, Chrysalis and Emmaus are like a present on Christmas morning. And when you open that present on Christmas morning, if you know what's inside, it's still exciting. But there's a whole nother level when you don't quite know what's inside, when you get to be surprised by certain things. And all of these surprises, I guess that you would call them, that happen are completely enveloped in love. We talk a lot about agape love. It's just a love on a whole different level than what a lot of people have experienced. We have kids that come into Chrysalis that don't have a whole lot of love in their lives. And so it can be a very profound weekend for them. But we don't want to ruin that present. And we want everybody to open up that present for themselves, and to really experience for themselves. So if I have somebody that comes to me one-on-one and says, I need to know exactly what's going to happen, I am not going. I'm not going. And I'll have a very frank and honest conversation with them. But the thing is, I don't want them to ruin somebody else's present by then sharing all that information with them. Does that I don't know if that makes more sense. So it's not that we can't share it. It's that we're trying to allow you to have your own experience when you go.
Yeah, I think that's been a lot of people's hesitation behind it. And I know the way it was presented to me, sometimes it's like, oh, I can't tell you. And so, what do you mean you can't tell me? This, there's always that extreme version of is this a cult? What am I getting myself into?
Yeah, are you going to feed me Kool-Aid? I think, in some ways it's very much like a retreat that you would go on. I mean, we have worship time, we have chapel time, we hear talks, we laugh a crazy amount. We laugh all the time. We have social time. You're going to form bonds with other people. So there's a lot of things that are very similar to a regular retreat. There's just special moments on the weekend that I don't like to ruin for somebody, because I want them to experience it for themselves. So, but any question, if somebody has a direct question for me, I'm always willing and open to answer that.
Yeah, I like the way you described it as a present and knowing what it is versus not knowing what it is. So you mentioned that you had to have a sponsor. Talk. What does a sponsor do? How do you get a sponsor? If I'm just a person who just wants to go, what do I do?
Yeah. Sure. Well, there's a lot of us around that have been. So we do have a board in the hallway outside of the fellowship hall. It's an Emmaus Chrysalis board, a little board with some information on it. Mary Darby and Greg Arnold are great overall people to talk to about Emmaus. I have been to Chrysalis. The co-leader of my small group, Regina Vivek, has been to Emmaus. So there's a lot of people around that can help guide you if you're looking for a sponsor. And then we have people in our own youth group who've been. So, but a sponsor really, they help you fill out your application, your paperwork. And they just kind of help you figure out what do you need to pack. we have the responsibility of actually getting you to the site. It's at a facility in Dallas, Georgia. We're one of the few Emmaus communities that actually owns our own facility, which is a huge blessing, because some places have to have it randomly at churches and try to fit into small spaces. And we have this whole building that's just for us. So a sponsor really has to get you there, get you home, help support you after you are home, and get you to, we have gatherings and events afterwards, that anybody who's been, and we invite people who haven't even been to these gatherings, and we have worship time and all of that. So, and when I talk about worship time, it's very much what we experience on Wednesday nights with Jesse. It's a lot of the same music, so you would know, the kids would know the music as well. So, so that's kind of the main thing. The sponsor's praying for you the whole weekend. So it's just mainly a guide to guide you and get you there and help you know whatever you need to know.
What are some of the barriers that you've seen that people have been like, well, I would go, but, or I just can't, like, that's not for me. Like, what are some barriers that you've seen, like, that people have brought up to be like, no, I don't want to go because of?
You are not allowed to watch or a cell phone, which completely freaks out people today. Now, when I was 16, we didn't have a cell phone. So
how am I going to count my steps?
How are you gonna, well, you can count them in your head. You can count them in your head. So, but we find, and the reason behind that, and that has been the thing ever since I went, we weren't allowed to watch. It really just allows you to kind of divorce yourself from just the constant thought process of, well, what time is it? What's next? And anticipating. We do so much just anticipating of, everything. I mean, whether it's what time we're gonna eat, or what time we're going to go to bed, or, where are we going next? And it allows you to fully focus on those people you're meeting, the information that you're hearing, and just absorb it and just enjoy the moment. I think one of the things with this time at home for me has really forced me, instead of running from soccer practice for my kids to choir, to all the things, is it's allowed me time to just focus sometimes on what's important. And it really allows us to do that more when we don't have, a phone or a watch or something that's distracting us, because it is a huge distraction. So that's one of the things that people say, keeps them away. But it's so funny, you get to the end of the weekend and you hear teenage, for me, girls, because I only serve on girls' flights, but saying, I don't need my phone back. I'm good for right now. I don't want to, I don't know, check my Facebook this second. It can wait till tomorrow. And they also ask everybody who's serving on the weekend to stay away from their phones. Mm-hmm. So now we have to have sometimes a watch because we have to keep things on track. But other than that, not really. So that keeps that. I hear that. And then sometimes it's just schedules. I think, again, another thing this time has taught us is that we have so overscheduled ourselves. Like, because right now as hard as it is being at home, we're also allowing ourselves time to breathe. Mm-hmm. And so people say, well, I have this, and this already, booked up. So I think Pastor Derek talked about it, because he's committing to going to Emmaus in October. And he said, I found one reason after another not to go. You can always find a reason not to go, always. Mm-hmm. And it happens with people my age trying to get them to go to Emmaus, because whether they've got kids or they've got activities, there's always a reason not to go. Mm-hmm. But there's more reasons to go, in my mind, to make that commitment. It's 3 days, it's not, it's not earth shattering to your schedule. It's 3 days. And the impact it can make on your life is tremendous.
Yeah, I think one of the things that is going on during this time in quarantine, and the reason why we're talking through Zoom and not face-to-face, mm-hmm. is our priorities are shifting. And I think mm-hmm. this shows, like, okay, yeah, it's just 3 days. It's not 2 months of a quarantine. It's not 2 months of a shelter in place. It's 3 days without a phone and a watch. Like, that's
Well, and one of the first things you hear somebody talk about is priorities. And I mean, I think it actually may be the first talk we hear. And I heard a quote one time that priorities was a singular word until the 20th century. there was never, a plural word. It was priority. You only had one priority until but then in the 20th, 21st century, we decided to make it a plural word. So it's just taking 3 days to make your relationship with Christ a priority. That's what it is. So,
so
yeah.
with that, is there a certain type of person or Christian that is ideal for the retreat?
Yeah.
Is there somebody who should stay away? Like, who should go on this retreat?
Sure. I think one of the things that we encourage sponsors to think about is that Chrysalis and Emmaus aren't meant to fix somebody. We're not there to fix somebody. We are there to love them unconditionally. We are there to serve them. We're there to guide our youth into learning how to be a servant, learning how to be loved and to love others. So I think I said earlier, I had not committed my life to Christ. I had grown up in the church, but we have people who haven't even grown up in the church who come to Chrysalis. And so there's a bunch of talks on the weekend. And one of the amazing things is that there's always a talk that it impacts different people in different ways, no matter where you are on your spiritual journey. So I love that about Chrysalis and Emmaus is that you can be anywhere on that journey. You can be a, very little bitty baby on your journey, or you can be a, full blown on your journey. It's still going to impact you in some way. It may be different than the other person, but we're not there to compare one person's baggage to what they're bringing to the weekend to another person. We're not there to judge where you are on your journey at all. We're there to meet you exactly where you are when you walk into those doors.
Yeah, I love that. How I think Jesus, no matter what, he'll meet you where you are. You might be further down the line than others or not, but he never leaves you there. You know what I mean? And that's one way that no matter where you meet Jesus, whether it's Chrysalis and Emmaus or whether it's at church or just on the street, he prepare for kind of move you forward. So with that, one of the things that I remember Evan Phillipson telling me was that on one of the flights that he served on, there was somebody who came in and who just said, like, I just don't think Jesus is real. But that weekend actually proved that it was. And so that's one side of the line versus another. What are some other things that you've seen God do through Chrysalis?
Well, so we had a couple of girls that came on a flight about a year and a half ago. And they were some of those, when I say they were sent there to fix them. And we knew it immediately the second we met them. And they were, I don't even know that I would call them atheists. They used some word I had literally never heard of before, but they did not believe. They definitely didn't believe there was a God. And that's really difficult on the team as well, because you're trying to love and serve these people who are like, no. I mean, they just sat there perfectly still, like, I'm not participating and I'm not going to do anything. But within 24 hours of being there, they were opening up. They were allowing people to love them and to just meet them where they were. And they said at the end of the weekend, they said, we've never experienced love like that. We didn't know love existed like we've seen here in our lives. We've never seen it. They were cousins, and they were 18, 19 years old. And that was a pretty profound moment as a team member, to see where they started and then where they ended the weekend.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think that, like, they've never experienced love like that?
It's interesting because I guess I don't know too much about their sponsor or where they came from. They weren't at my table. But I mean, I think they'd also never been in a place or in a situation where they didn't have an option but to be loved on. They had no option for 3 days. I mean, they were going to be served, and they were going to be loved on, and they were going to be really well fed, and they were going to hear some amazing worship music, and they were going to, hear these pastors talk, who we also have as part of our team. We have 4 to 5 pastors, local pastors who serve. And I have met some of those tremendous pastors through this whole thing. And I'm so blessed by them. And so I'm sure that, sometimes in a church setting, you can kind of just tune it out for an hour or two, or if you're somewhere, you can turn it out. But if you're there for 3 days and people are just loving you no matter what, and they're meeting you exactly where you are, that's got to just really impact your heart in a special way, So that was a pretty tremendous thing. So that's when Evan says somebody on that end of the scale, and then I see girls leave and they're so I think the word that I always hear them use is they're so on fire. They'll say, I just feel like I'm on fire and I can't wait to share God's love and grace with other people. I think it allows us, we talk about grace a lot, transforming grace and sanctifying grace. And it really just allows you to hear about grace in a new and profound way and experience in a new profound way. It gives us an opportunity, even for the team, to really lay down stuff at the cross that may be keeping us from accepting God's grace and God's love. So it's, I go back and I serve these with team members. And so I see team members who I think are, they are so steadfast in their journey. But for me, I love hearing the stories, even as somebody who's gone and served on many of these at this point. It allows us to continue our growth because we're never done growing. So no matter where you are in your journey, it can have an amazing impact on you.
Yeah, it's interesting to me how that kind of imagery of being on fire or warmth has always kind of been around when it comes to Jesus. I mean, so the scripture for the road to Emmaus is weren't our hearts burning within us when Jesus was there, or John Wesley, his heart was strangely warmed at Alder's Gate, how he felt like Jesus really did die for him. Like, it's interesting how that kind of imagery happens again and again, especially with students. It's like, oh, there is something more to this. There's a feeling beyond a feeling.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned that pastors are involved. What other ways? Because obviously this is a one weekend thing, and the local church wants to be involved, wants to continue this journey. How else is the local church kind of involved? Is it at all? Like, do they just get support? Like, what happens between? So one of our students goes on a retreat. What then?
So, well, one of the things and one of the reasons that we're really excited about Derek going is that then he can kind of bring he already knows everything he's going to hear, but it's also just, I still think you hear it in a new way anytime you go somewhere like this. So, but as for the pastors, so every flight, every weekend almost every weekend, I serve with different pastors, and it's just an amazing opportunity to hear the word of God through different pastors' mouths and through different pastors' experiences. I have a very good friend who lives down the street from me, Angela Johnson, and she serves at, I think, Sugar Hill now. And she's just a tremendous, we're talking about on fire spirit for God. And I love hearing her talk. I love hearing her share God's word and how God has loved her through everything she's been through. And the pastors that I find there are, when they are giving a talk, they just lay it all out. I mean, they're so honest, brutally honest about just things that have gone on in their own lives. And that's sometimes it makes it so much more accessible for all the rest of us when we hear that from a pastor, like, oh wow, they've gone through this, and so but when you come back, I mean, I think it's great when you have pastors who've been involved, because they can help support you. Because one of the things we talk about a lot is, we call it Christian action. And it's guiding all of our girls and our guys on how to come back and serve other people. Really, at the end of all this, we want to create disciples who create more disciples. That's what we talk about in church, but it's also exactly what we talk about at Emmaus and Chrysalis. So we want you to come back and get involved in the body of Christ, have that Christian community around you, and really just go out and be Christian action. So when you have a church that supports this Emmaus community, it just makes all the difference because they know what we're trying to do, and I see people come back and I see people serve on, we have, one of our friends who now serves on SPR. We have a friend on the trustees. We have friends who teach Sunday school. And not that you have to have been to Emmaus or Chrysalis to do those things, but I think it just gives you one more, an even deeper understanding of why that's important. Why is it important to put our Christian beliefs into action? So.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest testimonies for why it's such an important part of people's lives is the fact that they go back and serve. So why do you go back to serve? Why have you heard other people not just do this for 3 days, but want to go back and do this again and again and again?
Yeah. And I think one of the important things, because I will say, I think sometimes we've had in the past, not now, but pastors who have felt like it's competition, like, oh, wait, they're going to go serve Chrysalis and not serve here. But we're very intentional at Chrysalis and Emmaus about saying, no, we want you to go back and serve your local church. Like that is what this is about. Yes, come back and serve here, but it's not so much time that they're going to compete with each other. I get so much joy and fulfillment out of seeing, I don't want to get emotional, sorry. Kids be loved and understand how loved they are. And kids that already knew what love was and kids who don't know what love is. And they go in and so I get a lot of joy out of the team. We have team meetings. Our teams, by the way, are around 60 to 70 people big. We try to have about a third to a half of youth servants on the team, because we want the youth to see their fellow youth serving. So it's very important to us. And these youth, one of our friends, Lexi, who's just insanely amazing and giving of her spirit. So I learn so much from these youth. I do, even at my age. I find that I come back refreshed from these weekends. I'm exhausted physically because when you serve, it's a lot of work, but I am I'm myself back on fire. I learn, I get to hear the talks. I get to form relationships with the youth and the adults serving. I have made lifelong friendships from these people, and that they've seen me through some terrible messes, and they're there for me no matter what. And I think that once you're there and you see the fun also that they're having, they're like, I want to come back and do this. This looks so much fun. But it's mostly fun because we get so much joy from seeing people just blossom and open up. We call it Chrysalis, by the way, because the chrysalis is symbolizes how Christ can transform you, just like the caterpillar transforms into the butterfly. We want to see these kids transform from amazing youth into amazing young adults and adults. So that's kind of the reason behind calling it Chrysalis.
Yeah, I think I see, like you mentioned a little bit about seeing Chrysalis or Emmaus as competition, and I can understand how somebody can feel that way. It's like, like, my students are going on this retreat, but not my retreat. Or, you know what I mean? Like, I get that, but at the same time, this is such an important step that God meets people at. I mean, that's one thing that I really love and respect about Pastor Derek and his leadership of saying, like, your job is not to get students to come to Smyrna first. Your job is to introduce them to Jesus, and he'll take care of it from there. And I think Jesus works through Emmaus and Chrysalis in a very similar way, that you can see a transformation from a caterpillar into a butterfly.
Yeah.
So like, you decided to serve on the board. You believe in this ministry so much. Like, encourage students or even parents right now who are considering it to take that next step. What would you say to them?
Oh, goodness.
If they're considering it, ultimately, God calls them to this. We know that. But like, if they're considering this, what would you tell them of, like, maybe I'm, if they're kind of sitting there on the fence of, like, I think maybe I'll do this, but I don't know. What would you tell them?
Sure. I mean, even if my friends my age, I'm like, grab a friend and go together. If you're really nervous about it, grab a friend and go together. It's great to have, moral support when you're walking into a different environment that you don't know what you're walking into, because you're not going with 30 people that from God's light or something, but I think that if anything else, for the kids, like as you're getting ready to go to college, if you can realize the importance of that Christian community and the just the support that it can provide to you, if we can help you learn that, if we can help you understand a little bit better the unconditional love that God has for you and that this community has for you, our church community has for you, and the Emmaus community both. Again, it's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to worship. We're going to laugh, our tails off. There's a lot of silliness. But there's small groups. You're going to meet some incredible girls and guys. And as far as the parents, I think that it can be such a tremendous gift to give to your kids as they navigate. I mean, today's world is just ever changing. It's ever changing. It's ever crazy. And especially in these times, but the one thing that never changes is God's love for us and God's people's love for other people. And if we can give that gift to our kids and a even deeper understanding of that gift, I don't know of a better gift to give than that. So 3 days of being fed spiritually and physically, I mean, it's a tremendous gift to give somebody.
Yeah, I think food is a great motivator as well.
There's a lot of food. You've probably never eaten as much food as you will eat at Emmaus and Chrysalis. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, I think so our entire goal as a youth ministry is to send students on their journey in a manner worthy of God, knowing that they are going to go off to college. And this can be such a significant event for students that when they do go off to college, they realize, okay, I do need a Christian community. Yes, I do need that support, just like I had at Chrysalis. I think this could be for some students that catalyst to make sure that they do that as well. So talk to parents specifically for a minute. Like, you don't have a kid who's been on a retreat, but what would you tell parents, not just that this is a gift, but how can they best, harness and take advantage of this weekend that their student and their child just had? When they come back from this weekend, you've just convinced them to go after talking to them like that. This is a great gift. You've convinced them to go. Now they're coming back from this weekend. Do you have any advice for them to make sure that we always talk about mountaintop experiences and how to continue that and all of those things. What would you tell parents to help them transition their student from this weekend back into normal life?
Sure. Yeah. The thing we call it your fourth day, because you're there, you're there for 3 days. So, but your fourth day is the rest of your life. So how are you going to spend your fourth days, but we just say day. Small groups, so important. We call them reunion groups, but they don't have to be people who've all been to Chrysalis or Emmaus. I'm in 2 small groups, and they're my rock. They're my foundation, and they're people that I go to hold me accountable, but also to love me through anything. Sure, my mother now is my best friend. She probably wasn't my best friend when I was in high school. I hope she doesn't watch this.
I think my kids are going to be I'm going to be their best friend when they're teenagers.
You're going to make them be your best friend. They're going to make your best. I'm going to make it happen. But I think a parent can still be there to encourage them to find that small group of people that can guide them and help be there for them and hold them accountable. I tell you, one of the hardest things though is being held accountable for your behavior. Even at it is to find those people, but just to live life with you. So that would be my number one thing to a parent, somebody, even now though, that doesn't have to happen after Chrysalis, but get your kids involved in the small group. And so, but definitely after, that's one of the big things we really encourage and talk a lot about, is because on the weekend you are involved in a small group, And a lot of these girls and guys, they stay in touch with each other after, because they formed such a special bond experiencing this together. But form a small group with people who you can actually physically see on Zoom, I guess, right now. But so, and one of the things that it's funny, one of the first times so we have what's called table leaders, and you have an adult table leader and you have a youth table leader, which is awesome because, and I usually, as an adult table leader, I try to kind of sit back and let the youth table leader take control, because, they're going to have a lot more to relate to the kids than I might. But I had a girl one time a couple summers ago, and she was so worried about going off to college. And she said, I just feel like I have to find my forever group of friends. I have to find my forever group. This was the first day we were there. And she said, that's just my biggest concern. What if I don't find them? And I said, I don't think you need to put that much pressure on yourself. I said, you need to find the right people for you right now. I said, those might not be the same people in 5 or 10 years. I said, but God will lead you to the right people for right now. And that's all that really matters. And so that's absolutely the number one thing I'd say for parents, is to help them find the group of people that can help do life with them. You're just doing life together, basically, when you're in a small group. So that would be the main thing.
Yeah, I think that's one reason why you're such a good small group leader for high school girls, is because you've had that impact in your own life. Like I'm a small group leader, you're a small group leader, and we know that there is an importance there. And whether it's at a church or whether it's through a reunion group, it's important to have those people around you. Because being in a small group myself, it's so important for me to be able to lean on those guys and to be able to talk to them about anything. And they hold me accountable too. And maybe I don't like that all the time, but ultimately I know it's actually a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. Well, Stephanie, thank you so much for joining us today on this edition of our youth ministry podcast, where we just have conversations about allowing our students to be sent on their journey in a manner worthy of God. So thank you so much for talking to us about Chrysalis. And send me over some other information for like links and such. I know there's got to be some stuff for Chrysalis that I can attach to this on YouTube and the different ways that we put it out to make sure that people have the information they need.
Awesome. I'm welcome. I mean, I'm open to answering any questions that anybody has. Just don't want to open the present too much. But I'll answer any questions anybody has. Thank you for encouraging this. I really appreciate you.
Absolutely. I know that God is going to do a great work through Chrysalis coming out of this, and the priorities that we see of community and Christian, and being in Christian community and loving people are going to be all the more important. So thanks for talking with me today.
Awesome. Thanks, Dono.
Awesome. Thanks, Stephanie. I hope you guys enjoyed that conversation with Stephanie Malhotra, a small group leader here, as well as a board member of Chrysalis, about how God has transformed lives through that retreat. If you have a desire to go on that retreat or feel God pushing you in that direction, please come talk to me or her or somebody else who's been on one of those retreats. We'd love to give you more information. Thank you so much for joining us this week on the Smyrna First Youth Ministry Podcast. We're so grateful that you have given us some of your time. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. We love y'all.